Okay. So, this is Griff Ruby one more time. We've looked at some of the book and we've looked at how some of these things are important, but maybe it's good to kind of return back to the bottom line. I mean, I wrote my books in defense of the church, but in discussing some of these things with Father, he brings out a very important point. You know, the Mass is so central to the Catholic faith, and I have to admit, I kind of feel like how clear was I in that book on that? One could argue I might have been more clear, but I'll tell you something. One of the key things, besides being baptized and not being excommunicated or having otherwise separated oneself from the church, one of the key things that defines a Catholic is the profession of the true faith. And that profession is the Mass. By the true Mass, you profess that you're a Catholic. By something Novus Ordo or Protestant or anything else, you profess a non-Catholic faith. That is where it all is, right there, and how important it is. You know, because there's so much in the Mass, and maybe you can elaborate on how important that is, because that's, you know, the Mass is the Christ sacrifice and all that.
My feeling is that if the priest before Vatican II had known that the Mass is the Catholic Church and had known the theology about the Mass of the Catholic Church, Vatican II never would have happened. Never could have happened. And the thing that we have this book I told you about, A Key to the Doctrine of the Eucharist, a key to the doctrine. And it's a book that every priest should have, that every priest should read. And that's the basis of telling you what we lost. That book tells us what is the true Mass. And a lot of other things were the cause of Vatican II and the loss of faith in our popes. But the main issue is we have lost the sacrifice of the Mass. And it started with John the 23rd, putting St. Joseph in the canon of the Mass. He touched the canon of the Mass. But after that time, it was a free fall, Then they decided, as Martin Luther said, get rid of the altars, because the Mass is not a sacrifice, he said. But he was absolutely wrong, and Vatican II was absolutely wrong by saying the Mass is not a sacrifice. If it's not a sacrifice, it's nothing.
Yeah,
if we get rid of that sacrifice, we just have buildings. Yeah. I was in France.
Buildings with people in them.
A couple of years ago, the churches are museums.
Right.
Christ does not live in those churches, but things are not, there's nothing left without a sacrifice. And if we have the sacrifice of the Mass, the true sacrifice, then everything else will fall into place. No bad pope would ever be elected to the church. Mm-hmm. If we had the true Mass, the only way they could elect the pope to the church was to get rid of what we are. So what were these popes governing? Not the Catholic Church.
That's right. You've just summed it up. They have their own separate society.
They have their own agenda.
It does its own thing with its own agendas, with all of its own everything, and it has, you know, a different ceremony to profess a different religion, and therefore it has deprived itself of all the enormous, incalculable powers and blessings of the real Catholic Mass. But the Catholic Mass is powerful. Every Mass that's ever said by a real priest that's truly a Catholic Mass is a tremendous beacon of power. And I believe that every time that a real Mass is said, even though only by so many hundreds of priests or whatever left in the whole world, it still is the church being kept alive.
So what do we have to do, Griff? We have to somehow find a way to bring back the Catholic Mass as it was.
That's right.
Not as all these different liturgical people made all these different canons of the Masses. And people cannot do that. The Mass is sacred from Christ himself. If we have it, we have everything. if we shortchange ourselves and start whittling away, like Vatican II has done, they've taken away the entire Mass.
And they took, with that, they took away the Catholic faith. It's all claim to being the Catholic Church, right there. So that's the thing. It wouldn't even matter if some Novus Ordo attained sacramental validity. The fact remains, the whole character of the ceremony is non-Catholic. It is intrinsically out of communion with the Church.
Yeah,
You know, people who go there are materially in heresy. Now, maybe not formally, we understand that, and we don't blame people if they are ignorant, but the fact remains, materially, they are showing themselves not to be Catholics.
Yeah. And this animus telendi, desire to destroy, I think that all these popes that we're talking about were not popes. That was what their life was, this desire to destroy the Catholic Church. And they had to be led by no one else than Satan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what does Satan hate the worst about the Catholic Church? It's a church because they have to sacrifice at the Mass.
Yeah.
So if we can bring that back, maybe not completely, but bring it back to as many places as possible,
Yeah. Bring
then
back
we
the
have a
church.
hope. Then we have
The
a
true
hope.
church.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping. Maybe my books will help some people understand the true church lives among us traditionalists. We are where to go for real priests, real bishops, real ecclesiastical, everything that still exists with any right to being considered to be even the faintest vestiges of an ecclesiastical structure is with us.
Yeah.
The Vatican organization may have structures, so do the Anglicans, so do the Lutherans, so do secular nations, and that's how much relevance those things have. They have nothing to do with the church. And if we really love the church, we will seek the church, we will defend her honor, her strength, her authority, her unity, her holiness, her Catholicity, her apostolicity, all her marks, and her existence. And that is the real goal of what I have. That is our goals in life as Catholics who take all of this seriously.
Yeah.
So,
And so the Novus Ordo then is void of what it takes to be a Catholic. Clear and simple.
yeah.
Clear and simple. They do not have the body and blood of Christ.
That's it. Well, I thank you for your time on these things. This has been a very awesome interview, and we will, and I thank anyone who's been watching for your attention. Thank you.